In a quiet kingdom bordered by silver rivers and endless lavender fields, there lived a knight named Alaric. He was known across the land not only for his polished armor or his steady hand with a sword, but for something far gentler, his habit of listening. While other knights sharpened their blades at dawn, Alaric would rise before the sun and walk beyond the castle walls. He would remove his helmet, let the cool morning air touch his face, and listen to the wind as it moved through the tall grass. He believed the wind carried stories, whispers of distant hills, murmurs of sleeping forests, and sometimes, if he was very still, secrets of the heart. The castle of Ilarion stood upon a hill of pale stone, overlooking the kingdom like a patient guardian. Its towers were wrapped in ivy, and in spring, white roses bloomed along the courtyard walls. Alaric had served the king faithfully for many years. He had traveled through mountain passes, crossed misty valleys, and guarded caravans beneath star-filled skies. Yet despite his adventures, he carried within him a quiet loneliness he never spoke of. At night, when the great hall grew silent and the torches burned low, Alaric would polish his armor slowly, thoughtfully. The faint scratching of cloth against metal echoed in his chamber like a soft lullaby. He would pause often, gazing at his reflection in the curved steel, not to admire himself, but to search for something unnamed. A question, perhaps. Or a hope. He had once believed that love was like a battlefield, fierce, dramatic, and won through courage. But as the years passed, he began to suspect it was something else entirely. Something quieter. Like the wind, one evening, as the sky turned from gold to deep violet, the king summoned Alaric to the castle's highest tower. The old king stood by a narrow window, watching the horizon. "You have served me well," the king said, his voice steady but soft. "But I sense your heart wanders beyond these walls." Alaric bowed respectfully. "My loyalty remains with you, your majesty." "I do not doubt it," the king replied with a faint smile. "Yet even the most loyal knight must one day follow the path of his own heart." The words lingered in the air long after Alaric left the tower. That night, he could not sleep. Moonlight streamed through the arched window of his chamber, painting silver lines across the stone floor. He rose quietly, wrapped himself in a dark cloak, and walked once more beyond the castle gates. The world was hushed. Crickets sang gently in the grass, and the distant river shimmered like a ribbon of glass. Alaric walked toward the old oak tree that stood alone in the field, a place he often visited when he needed clarity. As he approached, he noticed something unusual. Beneath the oak tree, seated upon a fallen trunk, was a figure he had never seen before. She wore a cloak the color of midnight blue, and her hair caught the moonlight like threads of silver and gold. She was not startled by his presence. Instead, she looked up at him as though she had expected him all along. For a moment, neither spoke. Alaric removed his helmet slowly, as if any sudden movement might break the fragile calm of the night. "Forgive me," he said gently. "I did not know anyone else came here." Her voice, when she answered, was soft as the rustling leaves. "The wind told me someone would." The knight felt a quiet warmth stir within him, not the blazing heat of battle, but something steady and luminous. "I am Alaric," he said. She studied him thoughtfully, her eyes reflecting the stars. "I know." A strange peace settled over him. The wind moved through the branches above them, not restless, but patient. "And you?" he asked after a moment. She smiled faintly, though there was a hint of mystery in it. My name is Eloan. The name felt familiar, as if it had always existed somewhere in his thoughts, waiting to be spoken. They spoke little that night. Instead, they sat beneath the oak tree, listening to the river in the distance and the gentle breathing of the earth. There was no need for grand declarations. No need for promises. For the first time in many years, Alaric did not feel alone with the wind. When dawn began to soften the sky, Eloan rose. "Will you return?" he asked, surprised at the quiet urgency in his voice. She turned to him, her expression calm. "If you listen, you will find me." And with that, she walked toward the mist near the river's edge. The morning light grew brighter, and for a moment, Alaric wondered if he had imagined her, but as he stood beneath the oak tree, he felt something new, something gentle and undeniable, hope. That day, when he returned to the castle, the world seemed different. The stone walls no longer felt heavy. The corridors no longer echoed with emptiness. For the first time, the knight who listened to the wind realized that perhaps the wind had finally answered him, and somewhere beyond the river, beyond the rising sun, a new story had quietly begun. In the days that followed, Sir Alaric carried Eloan's name within him like a quiet flame sheltered from the wind. He did not speak of her to anyone. Not to the stable boy who greeted him each morning, not to the cooks who laughed in the kitchens, and not even to the old king, whose eyes always seemed to see more than he said. This feeling was too new, too delicate. Like the first bloom of spring, it required silence to grow. Each evening, when the sky softened into hues of amber and rose, Alaric returned to the oak tree. The first night after their meeting, she did not appear. The second night, the field was empty but for the whispering grass. On the third night, as a gentle mist rose from the river and the moon hung low and luminous, he heard footsteps behind him. "You are patient," Eloan said softly. He turned, and there she was, just as before, cloaked in midnight blue, her presence calm as still water. "I have learned patience from the wind," he replied. She smiled at that, and the space between them felt smaller than before. Not in distance, but in understanding. Without another word, she gestured toward the river. "Walk with me." The river that bordered the kingdom was wide but gentle, its surface reflecting the sky like polished glass. A narrow wooden boat rested among reeds near the shore, one Alaric had never noticed before. "You trust easily," he observed, offering his hand to steady the boat as she stepped inside. "I trust what feels true," Eloan answered. They crossed in silence. The rhythmic dip of the oars and the soft ripple of water created a soothing cadence, like a lullaby sung by the earth itself. On the far side of the river lay a place Alaric had never explored. Beyond a curtain of willow trees was a hidden garden. Moonflowers climbed pale stone arches, their white petals glowing faintly in the night. Lavender and jasmine scented the air, blending into something sweet and calming. A narrow path wound through the garden, lit by small lanterns that flickered like patient stars. Alaric felt no fear. Only wonder. "I did not know this place existed," he murmured. "It exists for those who are ready to see it," Eloan replied. They walked slowly along the path. The garden seemed untouched by time, no fallen leaves, no broken branches. Even the air felt softer here. At the center stood a small fountain carved from ivory-colored stone. Water flowed gently from its tears, the sound steady and peaceful. Eloan rested her hand lightly on the edge of the fountain. "This is where I come when the world feels too loud," she said. When expectations weigh heavily. When people see what I am meant to be, but not who I truly am. Her words lingered between them. Alaric understood that feeling more than he had ever admitted. As a knight, he was expected to be unyielding, fearless, always certain. Yet here, in this hidden garden, certainty felt unnecessary. Who are you truly? He asked gently. She studied the water for a moment before answering. I am someone who longs for simplicity, she said. For honesty. For a life not shaped by titles or duties. The faintest understanding dawned in him then. There was something in the way she spoke, measured, thoughtful, accustomed to restraint. You live within the castle, he said quietly. She did not deny it. I do, she answered. But not as a servant. The realization unfolded slowly, like a flower opening at dawn. You are the king's daughter, Alaric whispered. Eloan looked at him, not with pride, but with relief that the truth no longer needed hiding. Yes. The word did not create distance between them as one might expect. Instead, it deepened the stillness. Alaric bowed his head slightly, though not out of obligation. You have my loyalty, he said. I do not want your loyalty, she replied gently. I want your honesty. The fountain's water continued its quiet song. I am afraid, she admitted after a moment. Not of you. Not of this. But of what the world would demand if it knew. Alaric stepped closer, not enough to startle her, but enough that she could feel his presence beside her. The world always demands, he said. But the heart asks. She turned toward him, her eyes reflecting the lantern light. And what does your heart ask, Sir Alaric? The question settled deeply within him. It did not ask for glory, it did not ask for reward, it did not ask for permission. It asks to remain here, he said softly. Beside you. Silence followed, but it was not empty. It was full of understanding. Eloan's hand brushed against his. Not by accident, but not boldly either. A simple touch. Warm. Real. Then remain. She whispered. They stayed in the garden until the stars began to fade. Before returning to the river, Eloan paused. This place must remain ours, she said. Beyond duty. Beyond the castle walls. Alaric nodded. Our sanctuary, he agreed. As they crossed back to the kingdom's side, the sky was beginning to lighten. Morning birds stirred in distant trees. At the riverbank, she turned to him once more. Tomorrow, she said, I must attend the royal council. There are discussions of alliances. The word lingered with quiet weight. Will you come tomorrow night? He asked. If the wind carries me, she replied, her eyes shining with something both hopeful and uncertain. And then she was gone, disappearing toward the castle before the sun fully rose. Alaric remained by the river for a long moment, watching the water move gently past. For the first time, love did not feel like a battlefield. It felt like a garden beyond the river, hidden, fragile, and infinitely worth protecting. And though neither of them spoke it aloud, they both understood, something beautiful had begun, and beauty, in a kingdom of expectations, would soon be tested. The days grew warmer, and with them, the rhythm of the kingdom shifted. Spring settled over Ilarion like a gentle blessing. White roses opened along the castle walls, and the courtyards filled with the scent of fresh bread and blooming jasmine. Merchants arrived with silks and spices, musicians tuned their lutes in the market square, and banners in royal blue and silver fluttered from every tower, yet beneath the beauty of the season, something quieter stirred. In the great hall, long tables of polished oak were set for visiting nobles. Candles glowed in golden holders, and the high arched windows let in soft afternoon light. Servants moved gracefully across the stone floor, preparing for an evening gathering announced only days before. Sir Alaric stood among the other knights near the far wall, clad in ceremonial armor. Its surface shone like liquid sunlight, though he felt none of that brightness within himself. He had not seen Eloan for 3 nights. Each evening he had gone to the oak tree. Each evening the field had been empty, the river still, the boat unmoved. The garden beyond the willows had remained silent. He told himself she was bound by duty. Royal councils. Diplomatic conversations. Alliances, alliances. The word had begun to feel like a stone resting in his chest. A trumpet sounded at the hall's entrance, announcing the arrival of honored guests. Conversations softened into polite murmurs as the king entered, dressed in deep crimson robes embroidered with gold thread. At his side walked Eloan. Alaric's breath caught, but not in the way he expected. She looked radiant, as always. Her gown was pale silver, flowing like moonlight around her steps. Her hair was arranged simply, without excessive jewels or crowns. She wore no expression of joy nor sorrow, only composure, but she did not look at him. Behind her walked a tall nobleman clad in dark green velvet, bearing the crest of the neighboring kingdom of Valmir. His name, Alaric knew, was Lord Cedric, known for his diplomacy. His wealth, and his ambition. The king raised a hand for quiet. Tonight, he announced, his voice steady and proud, we celebrate the strengthening of bonds between our lands. The words echoed beneath the vaulted ceiling. Alaric felt the air shift. Cedric stepped forward and bowed deeply. It is an honor to stand within these walls. May our kingdoms prosper together. The king smiled. May they do more than prosper. The implication hung gently in the air, delicate yet undeniable. Music began. Servants poured wine. Nobles exchanged courteous smiles. Alaric remained still. He was a knight. He understood politics. He understood alliances forged not only through treaties, but through marriage, and yet, knowing did not soften the ache. Across the hall, Eloan finally lifted her gaze. For a brief, fragile moment, her eyes found his. The world narrowed, the clinking of goblets faded, the murmur of voices dissolved, even the music softened into distance. Her expression did not change, but something in her eyes did, a quiet apology, a silent reassurance, a question. Alaric did not look away. He did not frown. He did not harden. Instead, he gave the smallest nod, one only she would notice. I am here. The evening unfolded like a carefully rehearsed play. Cedric remained near Eloan's side, speaking in measured tones. The king watched with approval. Laughter rose politely from the gathered nobles. When the first dance was called, tradition required the honored guest to request a partner. Cedric turned to Eloan and extended his hand. She hesitated, so slightly that only the most observant eye might see. Then she placed her hand in his. Alaric felt the movement as if it were his own heart stepping forward. They moved across the polished floor with grace. Cedric spoke. Eloan listened. The candles flickered, casting long shadows along the walls. Alaric remained at his post. A fellow knight, Thomas, leaned toward him quietly. "It seems the kingdom will soon have a celebration greater than tonight's." Alaric's voice remained calm. "Perhaps. You do not seem pleased." "It is not my place to be pleased," Alaric replied gently. Thomas studied him for a moment but said nothing more. When the dance ended, applause filled the hall. Cedric bowed over Eloan's hand. She curtsied perfectly, but as she stepped back, her eyes drifted, just briefly, toward the far wall, toward him. Later that evening, when the hall grew crowded and conversation louder, Alaric stepped outside into the cool night air. The courtyard was quiet. Torches burned low along the stone archways, and the sky above shimmered with stars. He removed his helmet and let himself breathe. Love, he realized, was not like battle. In battle, there were clear enemies, clear strategies, clear victories or defeats, but this was something else entirely. Footsteps echoed softly behind him. "You always leave before the end," Eloan said. He turned. She stood beneath the archway, no longer surrounded by nobles or expectations. The silver gown caught the torchlight, but her expression was unguarded now. "I did not wish to intrude," he answered. "You never intrude," she said gently. For a moment, they simply stood there, the night wrapping around them like a quiet promise. "Is it true?" he asked, though his voice carried no accusation. She did not pretend to misunderstand. "There are discussions," she said softly. "Nothing is decided." "And what do you wish?" The question trembled in the air, not heavy, but honest. Eloan stepped closer. "I wish," she said slowly, "for the garden beyond the river." His heart stilled. "But wishing," she continued, "does not silence a kingdom." Alaric studied her face in the torchlight. He saw no weakness there, only conflict. "I would never ask you to choose between your people and your heart," he said. "And if I wished to choose both?" The wind moved gently through the courtyard. Alaric allowed himself one fragile truth. "Then I would stand beside you," he whispered. "Not as a knight sworn to your crown, but as a man who loves you." The words had finally been spoken. They did not crash like thunder, they did not blaze like fire, they settled softly between them, steady and certain. Eloan's breath caught, but she did not step back. "I was afraid to hear you say it," she admitted. "And now? Now I am more afraid not to." From within the hall, laughter rose again, distant, unaware. Eloan reached for his hand, only for a moment, only long enough to remind them both that what they shared was real. "I will come tomorrow," she said quietly. "To the oak tree." "And I will listen," he replied. She withdrew before anyone could notice her absence for too long. Alaric remained beneath the stars. The kingdom celebrated inside, music played, plans were made, but beyond the castle walls, beyond the expectations and alliances, something stronger than politics had taken root, and like the wind that first brought them together, it would not be easily silenced. The following evening arrived wrapped in a gentle hush, as though the kingdom itself sensed the delicate turning of fate. Sir Alaric left the castle before sunset, not in ceremonial armor this time, but in simple riding clothes. He did not wish to shine. He wished to feel. The fields beyond the walls glowed in fading gold. Wildflowers swayed in soft waves, and the oak tree stood waiting, its wide branches stretching toward the quiet sky. He arrived early. Patience had never felt so heavy. the air carried the scent of distant rain, though the clouds above were pale and scattered. Alaric rested his hand against the rough bark of the oak and closed his eyes. He listened, not for danger, not for command, but for her. Time passed gently, like water moving over stone. Then, footsteps in the grass. He opened his eyes. Eloan approached without royal escort, without jewels, without silver silk. She wore a simple dress of soft blue linen, her hair loose over her shoulders. In the fading light, she looked less like a princess and more like a dream walking toward him. "You came," he said quietly. "I said I would." Her voice carried no uncertainty tonight. Only resolve. They stood facing one another beneath the wide branches. The world beyond the field seemed distant, irrelevant. "I spoke with my father today." She began. Alaric did not interrupt. "He believes this alliance with Volmir will secure peace for generations. Trade routes, shared armies, protection against northern threats." She paused. "He believes it is the right path. And do you?" Eloan stepped closer. "I believe peace is precious," she said softly. "But I also believe peace cannot be built upon a heart that is absent." The wind stirred gently through the leaves above them. "He asked if I objected," she continued. "I told him I needed time." Alaric felt both relief and gravity settle within him. "Time can be a gift," he said. "Or a delay," she replied. They walked slowly around the oak tree, as though circling the very center of their shared truth. "Cedric is kind," she admitted. "He speaks respectfully. He offers stability." Alaric nodded. "Then the kingdom would approve." "Yes." Silence followed, not strained, but thoughtful. "But when he speaks," she continued, her voice softer now, "I feel as though I am listening from a great distance. As though my spirit stands somewhere else entirely." She looked at him then. "Here." The word was barely more than a breath. Alaric felt the weight of what she was risking, not merely affection, but expectation. Legacy. Duty. "I cannot promise you a throne," he said gently. "Nor wealth beyond what I already have." "I do not want a throne," she replied, almost smiling. "And I have never desired wealth." "What do you desire?" he asked. Eloan reached for his hand openly this time, without hesitation. "I desire mornings where I wake without pretense," she said. "I desire evenings where I may walk beside someone who sees me, not my title. I desire a life that feels chosen." Her fingers intertwined with his. "And you?" she asked. Alaric exhaled slowly. "I desire to protect what is fragile," he answered. "Not only kingdoms, but moments. Laughter. Quiet. You." The simplicity of it seemed to settle something between them. The sun dipped lower, painting the horizon in deep amber and rose. "Eloan," he said carefully, "if you choose your duty, I will not stand in your way." She studied him. "And if I choose you?" "Then I will stand beside you, even if the world questions it." She stepped closer still, until only the faintest breath separated them. "I am tired of being brave for everyone else," she whispered. "Tonight, I wish to be brave for myself." Alaric lifted his free hand and gently brushed a loose strand of hair from her face. The gesture was careful, reverent. "You are braver than you know," he said. The first drop of rain touched the grass, then another, a light, warm rainfall began to fall, soft as blessing, gentle as forgiveness. Neither moved. The rain dampened his shoulders, darkened her blue dress, cooled the air around them. The world felt cleansed, quieted. "I will speak to him tomorrow," she said finally. "To your father?" "Yes." Her eyes held no fear now, only calm determination. "I will tell him that I have chosen." The words echoed like a vow. Alaric's heart beat steadily, not wildly. This was not the reckless passion of youth. It was something deeper. Rooted. "If he forbids it?" he asked quietly. Eloan glanced toward the castle in the distance, barely visible through the misting rain. "He may try," she admitted. "But my heart is not a treaty to be signed." A faint smile touched his lips. The rain softened, becoming little more than a whisper. "Eloan," he said, his voice low and certain, "whatever tomorrow brings, know this: meeting you beneath this tree has been the greatest honor of my life." She rested her forehead gently against his chest. "And loving you," she whispered, "has been the truest thing I have ever done." The oak tree stood silent witness. The river flowed on, steady and patient, and as twilight deepened into night, two souls made a promise not with grand ceremony, but with quiet conviction. Tomorrow would test them, but tonight belonged only to them. Morning arrived wrapped in pale light and lingering mist. Within the castle walls, servants moved quietly through the corridors, unaware that the course of the kingdom trembled on the edge of a single conversation. Eloan stood before the tall windows of her chamber, watching the sun rise over the river. The same river that led to the hidden garden. The same river that reflected the night she had chosen her heart. Her reflection in the glass looked calm. But calm did not mean unafraid. A soft knock sounded at her door. "It is time, your highness," came the gentle voice of her attendant. Eloan nodded once. "Yes. Thank you." She did not dress in silver that morning. She chose a simple gown of soft ivory, unadorned, unembellished. She wanted no armor of silk, no shield of jewels. Only truth. Meanwhile, in the courtyard below, Sir Alaric stood among the other knights as the day's duties were assigned. His expression revealed nothing unusual. His posture remained steady, but inside, every breath felt measured. He did not know what would happen in the king's chamber. He did not know whether he would be summoned, or dismissed. He only knew that love, once spoken aloud, could no longer be hidden behind silence. High above, in the private solar of the castle, the king waited. He stood beside a long wooden table covered with maps and sealed letters. Sunlight streamed through narrow windows, illuminating silver threads in his hair. When Eloan entered, he did not immediately speak. He studied her. "You look like your mother today," he said softly. Eloan felt her throat tighten. "I hope that is not a fault." "It is not." Silence stretched between them, not cold, but heavy with history. "You wished to speak," the king prompted at last. "Yes, father." She stepped forward, steady and composed. "I have considered the alliance with Volmir. I understand its importance. I understand the stability it promises." The king nodded slowly. And I cannot give my hand to Lord Cedric." The words settled into the room like falling snow. The king's expression did not harden. Nor did it soften. May I ask why? Eloan met his gaze directly. Because my heart does not belong to him. A flicker of recognition passed through the king's eyes. To whom, then? He asked quietly. She did not hesitate. To Sir Alaric. The room grew still. Outside, a distant bell rang the hour. The king turned toward the window, looking out over the kingdom he had ruled for decades. Fields. Villages. The river glinting beneath the morning light. Alaric, he repeated, not in anger, but in contemplation. My most loyal knight. Yes. He is honorable. He is. He has protected this land faithfully. Yes. The king turned back to her. But he is not a prince. No. The simplicity of her answer seemed to carry more strength than argument ever could. The king walked slowly around the table, his boots echoing faintly on the stone floor. You believe love is enough? He asked. Eloan considered the question carefully. I believe love makes all other burdens lighter, she replied. And I believe a marriage without it makes even peace feel hollow. The king studied her long and deeply. Do you understand what you risk? He asked. Yes. The council will object. I know. Volmir may withdraw its offer. Then we will find another path. Her voice did not tremble. The king sighed softly. When you were a child, he said, you once asked me why I married your mother. Eloan felt a flicker of memory. You said it was because she challenged you, she recalled. A faint smile touched his face. And because she made this castle feel less like stone and more like home. He moved closer, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. I did not marry for strategy, he admitted. I married for partnership. Eloan's breath caught. But, he continued, I also ruled wisely. The two must coexist. She nodded. They can. Can they? He asked softly. She thought of the oak tree, the rain, the promise beneath its branches. Yes, she said with quiet certainty. The king studied his daughter, not as a ruler assessing policy, but as a father seeing the woman she had become. Bring him to me, he said at last. Her heart skipped. Father. I will not promise approval, he added. But I will hear him. Relief washed through her, not triumphant, but hopeful. Thank you, she whispered. Underscore 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 underscore. Later that afternoon, Alaric was summoned. The walk through the castle corridors felt longer than any battlefield march. Sunlight filtered through stained glass windows, casting colors across the floor, blue, gold, crimson. He removed his sword before entering the king's chamber, not out of fear, but out of respect. The doors opened. Eloan stood to one side of the room, composed but watchful. The king stood at the far end, hands clasped behind his back. Alaric knelt. Your Majesty. Rise, Sir Alaric. He did. The king regarded him steadily. You have served me with loyalty and courage, he began. You have defended my borders. You have protected my people. It has been my honor. And now, the king continued, you seek to protect something far more fragile. Alaric did not look toward Eloan. He kept his gaze forward. Yes, your majesty. You love my daughter. It was not a question. I do. The honesty in his voice filled the room. And if loving her costs you position? The king asked. Then I will serve without title. If it costs you comfort. I have lived without it before. If it costs you exile. There was the faintest pause, but only the faintest. Then I will carry her memory with honor. The king watched him closely. You would give up everything? Alaric's answer was steady. Everything but her. Silence settled once more. Eloan felt her heart beating in her throat. At last, the king exhaled. I see no ambition in you, he said quietly. Only devotion. He turned to his daughter. And I see no rebellion in you. Only conviction. The weight in the room shifted. I will not force a marriage upon you, the king declared. Eloan's breath left her in a rush of relief. However, he continued, you must both prove that this union strengthens the kingdom, not weakens it. Alaric bowed his head. We will. The king nodded once. Then you have my blessing. The words felt almost unreal. Eloan stepped forward, unable to hide the brightness in her eyes. Thank you, father. The king's expression softened fully now. Do not thank me yet, he said gently. Love is not the end of a story. It is the beginning of responsibility. Alaric met his gaze. We understand. And in that quiet chamber, beneath banners and sunlight and decades of history, a decision was made, not of politics alone, but of trust. Outside, the river continued its patient journey, the oak tree stood firm, and somewhere beyond expectation and fear, love had not only survived, it had been seen. News travels gently in peaceful kingdoms, but it always travels. Within days, whispers filled the corridors of Ilarion. Some were warm and hopeful. Others cautious. A few, sharp with doubt, a knight and a princess, love over alliance, romance over strategy. The council of nobles gathered in the great hall 3 mornings after the king's announcement. Long robes swept across polished stone floors. Rings flashed in candlelight as hands gestured in restrained disagreement. Sir Alaric stood near the tall windows, calm but alert. He did not wear ceremonial armor. Instead, he stood in simple steel and leather, a knight prepared for work, not spectacle. Eloan sat beside her father at the high table. She did not shrink beneath the scrutiny. An older noble, Lord Heron, rose first. Your Majesty, he began, bowing with stiff courtesy, none questioned Sir Alaric's honor. But marriage is not merely a matter of affection. Volmir offers security, shared forces, trade, protection against northern unrest. A murmur of agreement moved through the hall. The king nodded. And what do you propose? That we reconsider the alliance, Heron replied. At least until stability is guaranteed elsewhere. Eloan rose before her father could answer. Stability, she said clearly, does not grow from fear of what might happen. It grows from unity within our own borders. The hall quieted. She stepped forward slightly. Our people trust Sir Alaric. They know his courage. They know his loyalty. If he stands beside me, it is not weakness, it is a message. And what message is that? Heren asked. That leadership does not live only in crowns, she replied. It lives in service. Alaric felt the weight of her words, not as praise, but as shared responsibility. Another council member spoke. Words are graceful, princess. But what of action? The king leaned forward. Action, he repeated thoughtfully. He turned toward Alaric. Sir Alaric. Yes. Your Majesty. 3 villages along the northern hills have reported increasing unrest. Livestock taken. Supply caravans delayed. Nothing catastrophic, but unsettling. Alaric nodded. He had heard fragments of these reports. You will go, the king continued, not as a soldier alone. You will go as my representative. And my daughter will accompany you. A ripple moved through the hall. Eloan did not hesitate. I will, she said. Heren frowned. Your Majesty, sending the princess. Is precisely the point, the king replied calmly. If they are to lead together, they must stand together, not only in gardens, but in uncertainty. Silence followed. Alaric bowed. We leave at dawn. Underscore 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 underscore. The northern hills were softer than mountains but sterner than plains. Rolling green slopes stretched beneath vast skies, dotted with sheep and stone cottages. The journey north took 2 days. Eloan rode beside Alaric, not behind him. She wore practical riding attire, her hair braided simply. Villagers who passed along the road bowed in surprise, then smiled with curiosity. You are certain? Alaric asked quietly as they rode. I have never been more certain, she replied. On the 3rd morning, they reached the first village. The tension there was subtle but real. Farmers spoke of stolen animals, not by organized raiders, but by scattered groups from the deeper hills. A neighboring settlement, struggling after a harsh winter. They are not enemies, one villager explained. Just desperate. Alaric listened carefully. Desperation was not something one defeated with swords. That evening, instead of ordering patrols or punishments, Eloan requested a gathering between both villages. Torches were lit in the open field between settlements. People arrived cautiously, standing on opposite sides at first. Alaric remained nearby but silent. Eloan stepped forward into the center. We stand on the same soil, she began. We drink from the same rivers. Hunger in one village will not bring prosperity to another. A man from the hill settlement stepped forward, thin and weathered. We did not wish to steal, he said. Our winter stores failed. Our children grow hungry. Murmurs shifted. Alaric stepped forward now, voice steady. There are unused grain reserves in the southern storehouses, he said. We passed them on our way north. Enough to share. A farmer frowned. Share. And what do we receive? Eloan answered gently. You receive neighbors who survive, instead of neighbors who grow desperate. Silence stretched, the wind moved softly through tall grass. At last, an elder from the first village nodded. We remember harsher winters, she said. We remember being helped. Slowly, tension loosened, arrangements were made, grain redistributed, shared livestock grazing agreed upon, labor exchanged for supplies. No sword was drawn, no threat spoken. When dawn rose the next morning, both villages worked side by side repairing a damaged well. Alaric stood watching the effort, quiet pride settling in his chest. You did that, he said softly to Eloan. We did, she corrected. He smiled. Underscore 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 underscore. When they returned to the castle days later, word had already reached the court. The unrest had ended without bloodshed, trade between the villages strengthened, gratitude spread faster than fear ever had. In the great hall, Lord Heron bowed his head more deeply than before. It seems, he admitted, that unity may indeed be forged in more than one way. The king regarded his daughter and his knight thoughtfully. You have proven something important, he said. Eloan tilted her head slightly. What is that? That strength guided by compassion commands deeper loyalty than strength alone. Alaric felt the truth of it settle into him. Love had not weakened the kingdom, it had steadied it. That evening, beneath lantern light in the courtyard, Eloan took his hand once more. You see, she whispered. He nodded. The garden beyond the river, he said, was never separate from the kingdom. She smiled softly. It was where we learned how to serve it. Above them, the stars shimmered, calm, endless, patient. Their love had faced its first test, and instead of breaking, it had quietly woven itself into the very fabric of the realm. But deeper seasons still awaited, and love, like a kingdom, must continue to grow. Summer unfolded gently over Ilarion, fields ripened beneath golden sunlight, rivers ran slower and warmer, and the castle courtyards filled with music each evening. News of the northern reconciliation had spread far beyond the hills. Traders spoke of it on distant roads. Messengers carried letters of renewed trust. Even Volmir, though surprised, had not withdrawn entirely. They had instead proposed open trade discussions rather than marriage. The kingdom breathed easier, and yet, within the calm, there was anticipation. The king had announced that before the end of summer, a wedding would be held, not a grand spectacle meant to dazzle rival courts. Not a display of dominance, but a celebration of unity. Eloan had requested it be held outdoors. Not in the great hall, she had told her father gently. Stone has heard enough promises. Let the sky witness this one. So preparations began in the fields near the oak tree. Underscore 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 underscore. Alaric found himself restless in those days, not from fear, but from awe. He had faced battles without trembling. he had ridden through storms without doubt, but the thought of standing before the kingdom and pledging his life, not to defend it alone, but to share it, stirred something deeper. One evening, as the sun lowered into amber haze, he walked alone to the hidden garden beyond the river. The moonflowers were in full bloom now. Their white petals glowed softly against twilight. The fountain murmured its familiar song. He knelt by the water and studied his reflection. "You look the same," he murmured quietly to himself, but he did not feel the same. Footsteps rustled lightly along the stone path. "You always come here when you are thinking too loudly," Eloan said with a soft smile. He stood, turning toward her. "And you always find me." She stepped closer, her dress pale gold in the fading light. "You are troubled," she observed. "Not troubled," he replied. "Only aware." "Of what?" "That loving you is simple. Standing beside you is simple. But becoming something new together, that feels vast." Eloan considered this. "Vast does not mean dangerous," she said gently. "No," he agreed. "But it means responsibility." She walked past him and touched the edge of the fountain, letting water slip between her fingers. "Do you regret it?" she asked softly. The question was careful, not fearful. Alaric stepped behind her, close but not overwhelming. "Never," he said immediately. She turned slightly, searching his face. "Then what weighs on you?" He exhaled. "I have been a knight my entire life. I understand duty when it is given to me. But this is something we create ourselves." A small smile touched her lips. "Yes," she said. "It is." She reached for his hands. "Do you remember the first night beneath the oak tree?" she asked. "I remember every detail. You told me love felt like the wind." He nodded. "It moves unseen," she continued. "It cannot be commanded. But it shapes everything it touches." She stepped closer. "We are not abandoning duty," she said. "We are reshaping it." The words settled warmly between them. Alaric felt something steady inside him, not the adrenaline of battle, but the calm of understanding. "I do not fear loving you," he said quietly. "And I do not fear standing beside you." She replied. They remained there for a long moment, listening to the fountain's rhythm. "Tomorrow," she added softly, "we will walk the fields together. The people will gather. They will watch us." "Let them," he said. "Are you certain?" He smiled, not the polite smile of a knight, but the unguarded smile of a man. "I have stood before armies," he said. "I can stand before love." She laughed softly, a sound he knew he would spend the rest of his life protecting. Underscore 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 underscore. The next day, the fields near the oak tree shimmered with preparation. Simple wooden arches were being woven with white roses and lavender. Long tables were set for shared meals. Musicians tuned quiet strings beneath shaded canopies. Villagers worked beside nobles, farmers beside soldiers. No one had been commanded to attend. they had come because they wished to. The king stood at a distance observing the preparations, his expression thoughtful. They look different, he murmured to his advisor. Who, your majesty? The people. The advisor studied the gathering. They look invested. The king nodded slowly. Not in spectacle, he said. In meaning. Underscore 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 underscore. That evening, as lanterns were tested and final ribbons tied, Alaric and Eloan stood once more beneath the oak tree. No rain fell tonight, no tension lingered, only anticipation. Tomorrow, Eloan whispered, her hand resting in his, we become something more. Yes, he said. Does that frighten you at all? He thought carefully. It humbles me, he answered. She leaned her forehead gently against his. Good, she said softly. Because it humbles me too. Above them, stars began to appear one by one, the oak tree, silent witness to their first meeting, their promise, their uncertainty, now stood adorned with small lanterns, waiting to witness something else, not a dramatic climax. Not a grand conquest, but a vow, and in the quiet before that vow. They felt not the weight of expectation, but the steadiness of choice. Tomorrow would not be about proving anything, it would be about promising everything, and for the first time in his life, Sir Alaric did not feel like a knight preparing for battle, he felt like a man stepping toward peace. The morning of the wedding arrived wrapped in gentle light. No trumpets shattered the dawn. No cannons announced celebration. Instead, the kingdom woke as it always had, to birdsong, to distant river sounds, to sunlight spilling softly over stone and field, but there was something different in the air, anticipation. The oak tree stood adorned in white roses and strands of lantern glass that caught the early light like droplets of captured stars. Long wooden tables curved along the edges of the meadow. Wildflowers had been left undisturbed, woven naturally into the setting rather than replaced. This was not a spectacle, it was a gathering. Villagers arrived first, farmers in clean linen. Bakers with flour still faintly dusting their sleeves, children with bright curious eyes. Knights stood without rigid formation. Nobles conversed without excessive display. The king arrived quietly, wearing deep blue rather than ceremonial crimson, and then, Alaric stepped forward beneath the oak tree. He wore polished armor, yes, but without plumed helmet or ornamental cape. His sword rested at his side, not as a symbol of dominance, but as a reminder of service. He looked not at the crowd, he looked at the path between the tall grasses, and then she appeared. Eloan walked slowly across the meadow, sunlight catching in her hair. Her gown was simple ivory, flowing like morning mist. No heavy crown rested upon her head, only a delicate circlet of woven silver branches. She did not walk as a princess approaching a throne, she walked as a woman approaching her chosen future. The breeze moved gently through the meadow, stirring lavender scent into the air. When she reached him beneath the oak tree, the world felt still. The king stepped forward, but he did not speak immediately. Instead, he looked at both of them, not as ruler to subjects, but as father to daughter, as sovereign to protector. Love, he began quietly, his voice carrying without force, is not a treaty written in ink. It is a promise written in action. The meadow listened. My daughter, he continued, chooses not from impulse, but from conviction. And Sir Alaric stands not from ambition, but from devotion. He turned to them fully. Today, you bind yourselves not only to each other, but to this land. To its people. To its quiet mornings and uncertain nights. Eloan and Alaric faced one another, no priest stood between them, no elaborate ritual separated them, only truth. Alaric spoke first. Eloan, he said, voice steady and warm, I have sworn many oaths in my life. Oaths to kings. Oaths to protect. Oaths to defend. He gently removed his gauntlet and took her hand. But today, I swear something simpler and stronger. I swear to stand beside you when decisions feel heavy. I swear to listen when silence speaks louder than words. I swear to love you, not as a knight loves glory, but as a man loves home. A soft murmur moved through the crowd, not loud, but deeply felt. Eloan's eyes shimmered, though her voice remained calm. Alaric, she replied, I was raised to understand responsibility. To carry expectation. To lead. She stepped closer. But with you, I have learned something equally powerful, partnership. She lifted her chin slightly. I vow to walk with you through doubt without retreat. I vow to trust you in uncertainty. I vow to choose you, not once, but each day. The breeze carried her final words across the meadow. The king placed his hands lightly over theirs. Then let this union be witnessed, he declared softly, not only by crown and council, but by earth and sky. He stepped back, there was no thunderous applause, instead, there was something gentler, a shared exhale, a ripple of smiles, the quiet understanding spreading like sunlight. Alaric leaned forward, resting his forehead briefly against hers, not as display, but as promise. When they finally turned to face the people, they did not look elevated, they looked grounded. The celebration that followed felt less like ceremony and more like harvest festival. Children danced between tables. Musicians played soft melodies on stringed instruments. Villagers and nobles shared food from the same platters, laughter rose freely. The king watched from a distance, a thoughtful calm in his expression. His advisor approached. Your Majesty, the advisor said quietly, Volmir has sent a letter. The king accepted it, scanning quickly. And they request trade negotiations, the advisor said. They cite admiration for how the northern unrest was handled. The king folded the letter slowly. It seems, he murmured, that love may be more diplomatic than we believed. As evening settled, lanterns glowed softly beneath the oak tree. Eloan and Alaric slipped away briefly from the celebration, walking toward the river. The meadow behind them shimmered in golden light. Does it feel different? She asked. He considered. No, he said gently. It feels the same. She smiled. Good. They reached the riverbank where their story had deepened. The water flowed as it always had, steady, patient. We are married, she said softly, almost in wonder. Yes, he replied. And tomorrow? Tomorrow, he said, taking her hand, we continue. No grand declarations, no dramatic endings, just continuation. Above them, the sky darkened into velvet blue. Stars appeared one by one. The oak tree stood quiet behind them, the kingdom breathed easy, the wind moved gently across water and grass alike. Love had not arrived like a storm, it had grown like roots, steady, unseen, enduring, and beneath an open sky, two souls who once met in silence now stood united, not in spectacle, but in peace. Yet every new beginning carries its own horizon, and beyond this quiet joy, life, as always, would continue to unfold. Autumn arrived without urgency. The leaves around the oak tree turned slowly from deep green to amber and gold. The river cooled, moving with quieter clarity. Lanterns in the village windows glowed earlier each evening, casting warm light onto cobbled paths. Married life did not transform Alaric and Eloan into different people, it revealed them more clearly. Mornings often began before sunrise. Alaric would rise first, as he always had, stepping onto the balcony of their chambers to breathe the cool air. But now, when he turned back inside, he no longer faced solitude. Eloan would still be resting, sunlight just beginning to brush her features, and in those quiet moments, he understood something profound. Love was not in grand gestures, it lived in shared stillness. They worked together daily, not symbolically, but practically. Eloan sat in council meetings, reviewing trade routes and agricultural reports. Alaric joined discussions on border security and village protection. But more often than not, they chose to travel together, quietly visiting settlements without announcement. In one southern village, they found a schoolhouse in need of repair. Rather than simply ordering funds allocated, they spent the afternoon helping carry timber and patch the roof alongside villagers. In the western hills, they sat with shepherd families who feared another harsh winter. Together, they developed shared storage systems, small changes that prevented desperation before it could grow. The people noticed, not because proclamations were made, but because presence was felt. One evening, as the first true autumn wind stirred across the fields, Eloan and Alaric returned to the oak tree. The meadow was quieter now. Harvest had passed. The long tables had been stored away. Only the tree remained, steadfast, patient. They sat beneath its branches as they once had before vows were spoken. "Do you miss it?" Eloan asked softly. "Miss what?" "The simplicity of when it was only us here." Alaric considered. "No," he said gently. "Because it is still us." She leaned slightly against him. "Sometimes I fear we will be consumed by responsibility." He brushed a fallen leaf from her sleeve. "Responsibility is not a fire that consumes," he replied. "It is a fire that warms, if tended together." She smiled faintly. "You have grown wise." "I married wisely," he answered. She laughed softly, a sound the wind carried across the quiet field. Underscore 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 underscore. Winter approached gradually. Frost traced delicate patterns along castle windows. Snow fell lightly over rooftops and fields, transforming the kingdom into soft white stillness. It was during this first winter of their marriage that a message arrived from the northern border, not of unrest, but of gratitude. The villages they had helped months earlier had experienced a stable harvest and a peaceful season. They sent woven blankets and carved wooden tokens, not as tribute, but as thanks. the king read the message aloud during council. "You see," he said thoughtfully. "Strength rooted in compassion sustains longer than strength imposed." Alaric met Eloan's gaze across the chamber. No words were needed. Underscore 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 underscore. One particularly quiet night, snow falling steadily outside, they returned to the hidden garden beyond the river. The willow branches were bare now, but the fountain still flowed, steam rising gently into the cold air. They walked slowly along the stone path. "Do you remember the first time you brought me here?" Alaric asked. "I remember you looking as though you had discovered a secret world," she replied. "I had." She touched the fountain's edge. "This place was once my escape." "And now?" he asked. She looked at him warmly. "Now it is a reminder." "Of what?" "That love does not remove duty. It transforms how we carry it." Snow began to fall lightly even here, settling briefly on stone before melting. Alaric drew her closer, wrapping his cloak around them both. "Do you regret choosing me?" he asked quietly, not from insecurity, but from reverence for her choice. She looked up at him, surprised. "Never." He studied her face, softened by winter light. "I sometimes think," she continued gently, "that had I chosen differently, the kingdom might have been stable." "And now?" "Now," she said, resting her hand over his heart, "it is alive." Silence settled, not heavy, but complete. Outside the garden walls, the world continued its quiet rhythm. Snow fell, rivers moved beneath ice, fires burned in hearths. Within that winter stillness, their love did not blaze brightly, it glowed steadily. Not fragile, not fleeting, enduring, and though neither spoke it aloud, they both understood. The greatest romances are not written in dramatic climaxes, they are written in seasons, and theirs had only just begun its second year. Beyond the frost-covered fields and lantern-lit corridors, spring would return again, and with it, new chapters, not of uncertainty, but of growth. One final season remained before their story would settle fully into legend. And it would not arrive with storm, it would arrive with something softer. Spring returned as it always had, quietly, faithfully. Snow melted into streams that fed the river. Buds appeared along bare branches. The oak tree in the meadow awakened first, tiny green leaves unfolding like careful promises. Years had not passed, only seasons, yet something had deepened. Sir Alaric still rose before dawn. He still stepped beyond castle walls to feel the morning air. But now, footsteps often followed him. Eloan would join him, sometimes wrapped in a simple cloak, sometimes barefoot in the dewy grass. They did not always speak, they did not need to. The kingdom prospered in ways that were not loud but lasting. Trade with Valmir flourished through partnership rather than marriage. The northern hills remained peaceful. Schools were built in smaller villages. Shared storehouses ensured that no winter left families desperate. The council no longer questioned their union, they consulted it, and the king, older now, gentler in presence, watched with quiet satisfaction. One evening, as golden light stretched long across the meadow, Alaric and Eloan walked once more to the oak tree. lanterns were not hanging there now, no guests gathered, no vows waited, only wind. They sat as they had on that first night, before titles felt reshaped, before promises had been spoken aloud. "Do you remember what you told me?" Eloan asked softly. "Which part?" He smiled. "You said love felt like the wind." He nodded slowly. "I was right," he said. She tilted her head slightly. "How so?" "Because it is not something we hold," he explained gently. "It is something that moves through us. It cannot be owned. Only welcomed." The breeze stirred around them, lifting strands of her hair, brushing against his shoulders. "When I was younger," she said quietly, "I believed love would change everything at once. And now? Now I see it changes things slowly," she answered. Patiently. Alaric reached for her hand. "Slow change endures," he said. They sat in silence, listening to birds settle into branches overhead. After a while, Eloan spoke again, softer now. "My father told me something recently." "What was that?" "He said a kingdom is strongest when its rulers are not afraid to be human." Alaric smiled faintly. "Then we are very strong indeed." She laughed softly. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in amber and rose, the same colors as the night they first met. "Do you ever wonder," she asked gently, "what would have happened had I not come that night?" Alaric looked out across the fields. "I would have continued listening to the wind," he said. "And perhaps I would have spent my life believing it carried stories meant for others." She squeezed his hand. "I almost did not come." He turned toward her. "Why?" "I was afraid," she admitted. "Afraid that if I followed something so quiet, I might lose something loud." "And did you?" She shook her head. "I gained something lasting." The last edge of sunlight slipped below the horizon, lanterns flickered on in the distant village, the river shimmered faintly in twilight. Alaric stood and offered her his hand. "Walk with me," he said. They made their way slowly toward the riverbank, the place where the hidden garden waited beyond the willows. They crossed in the same narrow boat, the water rippling gently beneath them. The garden was in full bloom again, moonflowers opened beneath the rising stars. The fountain murmured softly, unchanged by time. They paused at its edge. "This place once felt separate from the world," Eloan said. "It never was," Alaric replied. "It was where we learned how to meet it." She looked at him, eyes reflecting starlight. "We will grow older," she said quietly. "Yes." "Our hair will silver." "Yes." "Responsibilities will shift. Seasons will turn." He brushed his thumb gently across her hand. "Yes." "And when they do?" He leaned his forehead gently against hers, just as he had on their wedding day. "Then we will listen." He whispered. "To what?" "To the wind." The fountain continued its steady rhythm. Above them, stars shimmered across the vast night sky, not dramatic, not demanding, simply present. Love had not come to them like a storm, it had not demanded sacrifice beyond willingness, it had not required abandoning duty, it had asked only one thing: to be chosen, again, and again, and again. Years later, when children would run beneath the oak tree and elders would speak of the time a princess chose a knight, the story would not be told as rebellion, it would be told as balance, as proof that strength and tenderness may stand side by side. And on quiet evenings, when the wind moved gently across the fields of Ilarion, some would say it still carried a story, not of battle, not of conquest, but of two souls who listened closely enough to hear it begin, and who loved steadily enough to let it continue.